My name is Alana, and I'm 32 years old. 7 years of marriage to Derek used to feel like a fairy tale until our anniversary trip to Italy changed everything. What was meant to be a romantic getaway became the moment that shattered the illusion of our perfect life. Being abandoned in a small Italian village by my husband and his friends was devastating, but it led me to discover a strength I never knew I had. A month later, when Derek tracked me down in Greece, he barely recognized the woman standing before him. If you're watching this, let me know where you're tuning in from and hit that like and subscribe button. My journey from abandonment to freedom might just inspire you too. I grew up in a small town in Wisconsin where the highlight of my childhood was reading books about faraway places. I dreamed of traveling the world, exploring ancient cities, and immersing myself in different cultures. That dream led me to study languages in college, where I met Derek during my sophomore year. He was charismatic, ambitious, and unlike anyone I'd ever met. Our first date was at a campus cafe where we talked until they closed. By our third date, I was already imagining our future together. We dated for 3 years before he proposed during a weekend trip to Chicago. The wedding was everything I dreamed of: a beautiful ceremony with close family and friends, followed by a honeymoon in Hawaii. The first few years of our marriage were blissful. We bought a charming house in the suburbs of Chicago. Derek worked at an investment firm while I built my career as a translator. We traveled when we could plan for our future and supported each other through every challenge. Derek would surprise me with weekend getaways or little gifts that showed he was thinking of me. I felt cherished and valued. Everything changed when Derek got promoted to senior investment manager 3 years into our marriage. The promotion came with a significant salary increase, but also longer hours, more pressure, and a new circle of colleagues. Jack, Paul, and Nathan became fixtures in our lives. They were all married men with similar backgrounds, ambitious, competitive, and focused on climbing the corporate ladder. At first, I tried to befriend their wives. Melissa was married to Jack, the unofficial leader of the group. She was polished and poised, always dressed impeccably, and quick to mention their vacation home or latest luxury purchase. Stephanie, Paul's wife, followed Melissa's lead in everything, while Lauren, Nathan's wife, was quieter, but clearly part of their exclusive circle. I soon realized these friendships would be superficial at best. During dinner parties, they would talk about country club memberships and designer brands, showing little interest in my work or passions. When I talked about my translation projects, they would smile politely before changing the subject. As months passed, Derek began canceling our plans to join impromptu drinks with the guys. Date nights became rare, replaced by business dinners, where I was expected to smile and make small talk while the men discussed work. When I expressed my concerns about how much our life had changed, Derek dismissed them as jealousy. "This is how networking works, Alana," he'd say. "These connections are important for my career, for our future." I began noticing subtle put-downs when we were with his friends. Derek would interrupt me, contradict my opinions, or make jokes at my expense. "Alana's got these crazy ideas about traveling the world," he'd say with a laugh, as though my dreams were childish fantasies. When a major translation project required extensive travel, Derek convinced me to turn it down. "We need stability right now," he insisted. "Besides, my income is more than enough for both of us." Gradually, I went from having an active career to taking occasional freelance jobs that wouldn't interfere with Derek's schedule. Despite these changes, I clung to the belief that our marriage was just going through a rough patch. When our 7th anniversary approached, I suggested a trip to Italy, just the two of us. Italy had always been at the top of my travel wish list, and I spoke enough Italian to navigate comfortably. 2 weeks in Italy, I pitched to Derek one evening. Rome, Florence, and the coastal villages. No work calls, no business dinners, just us reconnecting. To my surprise and delight, Derek agreed enthusiastically. "That sounds perfect," he said, kissing me in a way that reminded me of our early days together. "I'll clear my schedule." I spent months planning the perfect itinerary, researching charming restaurants, and booking boutique hotels. This trip would be our fresh start, I was sure of it. In the weeks leading up to our departure, Derek seemed more attentive, more like the man I had fallen in love with. I allowed myself to hope that everything would be okay. The moment we landed in Rome, I felt a surge of excitement and anticipation. The eternal city welcomed us with warm sunshine and the promise of adventure. Our hotel was a restored palazzo near the Spanish Steps, with a terrace overlooking the city's terracotta rooftops. "Can you believe we're finally here?" I asked Derek as we unpacked in our room. He smiled and pulled me into an embrace, and for a moment, everything felt right again. That evening, we had dinner at a small trattoria tucked away on a cobblestone street. The food was delicious, the wine was perfect, and Derek held my hand across the table. We walked back to our hotel under the stars, and I felt hopeful about our future. The next morning I woke early, eager to start exploring. I was sipping espresso on our terrace when Derek's phone buzzed with a message. His expression shifted as he read it. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. "Jack and the guys are in Europe for a business conference. When I mentioned our trip, they thought it would be fun to meet up for part of it. They'll be joining us tomorrow with their wives." I felt like I'd been doused with cold water. "You invited them on our anniversary trip without asking me." "It's not a big deal," Derek replied defensively. "We'll still have plenty of time alone. They're only joining us for a few days." I swallowed my disappointment and tried to be understanding. "Which part of the trip will they join?" "They'll meet us here in Rome, then travel with us to Florence," Derek explained. "They have their own plans after that." That afternoon, as we visited the Colosseum, I noticed Derek checking his phone constantly. When I pointed out interesting historical details, he nodded absently. The magic of our first day was already fading. Jack, Melissa. Paul, Stephanie, Nathan, and Lauren arrived the next morning. They greeted me with air kisses and superficial compliments, but their attention quickly turned to Derek. Within minutes, they were discussing an upcoming deal, and I was effectively excluded from the conversation. The next 3 days in Rome were nothing like I'd planned. Instead of intimate dinners, we had loud group meals where the men dominated the conversation. The wives formed their own clique, discussing shopping and gossiping about mutual acquaintances. "I'm so glad we could crash your little anniversary trip," Melissa said with a laugh during one dinner. "Derek works so hard he deserves to have some fun with the boys." When I tried to follow our original itinerary and visit the places I'd researched, I was overruled by group decisions. "The Borghese Gallery sounds boring," Jack declared when I suggested it one morning. "We're thinking of doing a private wine tasting instead." Derek never once took my side or suggested we split from the group for a few hours. When I expressed my frustration in private, he accused me of being unsociable. "They're making an effort to include you," he said. "Can't you at least try to fit in?" By the time we left Rome for Florence, I was feeling increasingly isolated. During the train ride, I sat alone while Derek huddled with his friends, laughing at inside jokes. The wives sat together occasionally, glancing my way, but never inviting me to join their conversation. Florence was as beautiful as I'd imagined, but I couldn't fully enjoy it. One afternoon, while the others went shopping, I slipped away to visit the Uffizi Gallery alone. For a few hours, surrounded by Renaissance masterpieces, I felt at peace. When I returned to our hotel, Derek was annoyed. "We've been looking everywhere for you. Why didn't you tell anyone where you were going?" "I did tell you at breakfast," I replied. "You were too busy planning golf with Jack to listen." The next day, I convinced Derek to visit a small museum off the typical tourist path. As we wandered through the quiet galleries, admiring the artwork, he actually engaged with me, asking questions and sharing observations. For a brief moment, I glimpsed the man I'd married. "This is nice," he said, taking my hand. "I'm sorry I've been distracted." That evening, Derek suggested we join the group for dinner at an exclusive restaurant Jack had heard about. Though disappointed, I agreed, hoping to build on our afternoon's connection. But at dinner, Derek was immediately pulled back into his friend's orbit, leaving me to make awkward conversation with their wives. "Alana, what exactly do you do again?" Stephanie asked during a lull in conversation. "Something with books, right?" "I'm a translator," I replied, "primarily Italian and Spanish texts." "How quaint," Melissa remarked with a condescending smile. "Though I imagine it doesn't pay much compared to what our husbands make." The comment stung, but I forced a smile. It's rewarding in other ways. After a week in Florence, Jack suggested we visit Porto Santo, a small coastal town he'd heard about from a colleague. "It's supposed to be exclusive and unspoiled," he said. "Perfect for the last few days of your anniversary trip." I was surprised to learn they planned to continue traveling with us, but Derek seemed excited about the idea. When I questioned him later, he brushed off my concerns. They're extending their trip by a few days. It'll be fun. Besides, Porto Santo is supposed to be romantic. The coastal town was indeed beautiful, with its colorful buildings perched on cliffs overlooking the Mediterranean. Our hotel had spectacular views, and despite everything, I found myself captivated by the location. That evening, our anniversary night, I suggested a private dinner at a restaurant I'd found that morning, a small place with tables overlooking the sea. Actually, Derek said, looking uncomfortable, Jack already made reservations for all of us at the hotel restaurant. He's ordered champagne to celebrate our anniversary. Our anniversary, I repeated slowly, which we're celebrating with your work friends. Don't start Alana, Derek warned. They're making a nice gesture. No, Derek. I've had enough, I said, my patience finally snapping. This was supposed to be our trip. Instead, it's turned into an extension of your work life like everything else. When was the last time you prioritized our relationship over those people? Those people are my friends, Derek shot back, and they've been more supportive of my career than you have. All you do lately is complain about how much I work or how much time I spend with them. The argument escalated with years of bottled frustration pouring out. I brought up the canceled date nights, the dismissive comments, the way he'd changed since his promotion. Derek countered that I was jealous of his success and resentful of his friends. Maybe I made a mistake marrying someone who doesn't understand ambition, he said coldly. His words hit me like a physical blow. Maybe you did, I replied, fighting back tears. Derek stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I sat on the edge of the bed, shaking with anger and hurt. Hours later, I received a text. Having drinks with the guys. Don't wait up. I spent our anniversary night alone, crying myself to sleep in a beautiful hotel room in Italy. The next morning, I woke to an empty room and a hastily scrawled note on the hotel stationery. Went for breakfast with everyone. Join us when you're up. No apology, no acknowledgement of our fight, or the fact that he'd abandoned me on our anniversary night. I showered and dressed slowly, dreading the prospect of facing the group after everything that had happened. The hotel lobby was deserted when I went downstairs. I asked the receptionist if she'd seen my husband and his friends. Si, signora, she replied. They went into town for breakfast about an hour ago. I walked into Porto Santo's main square, passing charming shops and cafes, until I spotted them at an outdoor table at a bustling cafe. They were laughing Derek in the middle of the group, looking completely unbothered by our fight from the night before. I hesitated suddenly, unsure if I wanted to join them. As I approached, I overheard Jack's voice, clear and mocking. Man, you should have seen Alana's face when you didn't come back last night. Bet she's learning her lesson about being so clingy. Derek laughed along. She needs to understand that this is how it is now. She can't expect me to revolve my life around her. Women like that always try to control you, Nathan added. Lauren used to be the same way until she realized it was easier to just go along with things. I stood frozen, the betrayal cutting deeper than anything I'd felt before. These weren't just thoughtless comments. This was my husband actively participating in mocking me to his friends. Taking a deep breath, I walked up to the table. The laughter died immediately when they saw me. Alana, Derek said, his smile faltering. We were just about to order more coffee. I heard what you were saying, I replied, my voice surprisingly steady. All of you. Is that what this trip has been about? Teaching me a lesson? Derek had the decency to look embarrassed, but Jack quickly jumped in. We were just joking around, Alana. Don't take everything so seriously. Joking about my marriage, about deliberately excluding me and making me feel unwelcome on my own anniversary trip. I looked at each of them, including the wives who were studiously avoiding my gaze. Is that your idea of humor? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Derek finally spoke. Let's not make a scene, okay? Sit down, have some coffee, and we can talk about this later. No, I said firmly. I want to talk about it now. Look, Jack interjected, clearly annoyed by my refusal to back down. We're all getting a little tense. Why don't we lighten the mood? There's a charming village about an hour's drive from here called Vicamare. Great little shops, amazing views. Let's make a day trip of it. The others quickly agreed, apparently relieved by the change of subject. Derek gave me a pleading look. Come on, Alana. It'll be fun. We could use a change of scenery. Against my better judgment, I agreed, not wanting to spend another day alone and hoping we might find a moment to talk privately. We rented 2 cars. Derek drove one with Jack, Melissa, and me, while Paul drove the others. The coastal road was stunning, winding along cliffs with breathtaking views of the Mediterranean. Under different circumstances, I would have been captivated by the beauty. Instead, I sat silently in the back seat, acutely aware of the tension. Vicamare was indeed charming, a tiny village perched on a hillside with narrow streets, stone buildings, and flowers cascading from window boxes. We parked at the town's entrance and wandered through the maze-like streets. I tried several times to pull Derek aside, but he always managed to stay with the group. After an hour of exploring, we found a small plaza with a few cafes and shops. While the others went into a wine shop, I finally cornered Derek near a fountain. "We need to talk about what happened last night," I said, "and about what I overheard this morning." Derek sighed impatiently. "Can we not do this here? We're supposed to be having a good time." "When are we supposed to do it, Derek? You've been avoiding me this entire trip." "That's not true. You're the one who's been difficult, refusing to enjoy yourself and making everyone uncomfortable." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I've made everyone uncomfortable. Your friends have taken over our anniversary trip. You abandoned me last night, and this morning I found you all laughing at me." Our voices had risen, attracting the attention of the others, who were now watching us from outside the wine shop. "You're being dramatic," Derek said dismissively. "As usual." "Dramatic? Is that what you call it when your wife expects to be treated with basic respect?" I felt tears threatening, but forced them back. "What happened to us, Derek? We used to be partners. Now I don't even recognize you." Jack approached, slinging an arm around Derek's shoulders. "Everything okay here?" "No," I said firmly. "Everything is not okay." "Alana's upset about last night," Derek explained, as if speaking about a petulant child. "Still," Jack raised an eyebrow. "Come on, Alana, we're on vacation. Learn to take a joke." "A joke?" I repeated incredulously. "What exactly is the joke, Jack? That my husband ignores me, that you've all been mocking me behind my back?" "The joke is how seriously you take yourself," Jack retorted. "Derek works his ass off to give you a good life, and all you do is complain." The others had gathered around now, watching the confrontation with uncomfortable expressions. I looked at their faces and suddenly saw the situation with perfect clarity. These people weren't friends. They were a pack with Jack as the alpha and Derek desperately trying to maintain his position. "I want to go back to Porto Santo," I said. "Now." Jack exchanged glances with the others, then looked at Derek with a smirk. "What do you think, Derek? Should we head back because your wife's having a tantrum?" Derek hesitated, visibly torn between me and his friends. In that moment of hesitation, I saw everything I needed to know. "You know what?" Jack said, dangling the car keys. "I think Alana needs some time to cool off. Let's see how she gets back on her own." "What?" I stared at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious." "Jack." Melissa started looking concerned for the first time. "That's taking things a bit far." "It's just a joke," Jack insisted. "The town has buses, taxis. She'll figure it out. Maybe the walk back to reality will do her some good." I turned to Derek, waiting for him to speak up to defend me. He looked uncomfortable but remained silent. "Derek," I said quietly, "are you really going to let this happen?" He avoided my eyes. "You're being unreasonable, Alana. Maybe some time apart is good. We'll see you back at the hotel." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "You're actually going to leave me here in a foreign country on our anniversary trip?" "Don't be so dramatic," Jack laughed. "It's just a little village in Italy, not the middle of the desert. Let's go, guys." They started walking toward the cars, Derek trailing behind them. I stood frozen in shock, waiting for him to turn around to come to his senses. At the edge of the plaza, he paused and looked back. For a moment, our eyes met, and I thought he might change his mind. Instead, he shrugged helplessly and continued walking. I watched in stunned disbelief as they got into the cars. Jack called out the window, "Let's see how she gets back," and they all laughed as the cars pulled away, leaving me standing alone in the plaza of a tiny Italian village whose name I barely knew. As the sound of the car engines faded into the distance, the reality of my situation crashed over me. I was alone in a village I didn't know miles from our hotel, with only my purse containing my passport, some cash, my credit card, and my phone. My first reaction was pure panic. I fumbled for my phone and called Derek. It rang several times before going to voicemail. "Derek, I can't believe you just left me here," I said, my voice shaking. "Please come back and get me. This isn't funny." I sent several text messages, each more desperate than the last. No response. I tried Jack's number with the same result. Even Melissa, who had shown a brief moment of concern, didn't answer when I called. Standing in the middle of the plaza, I felt a wave of dizziness and sat down heavily on a nearby bench. I was vaguely aware of being watched by locals and a few tourists, but I was too distraught to care. An elderly Italian couple approached cautiously. The woman said something in Italian that I couldn't fully comprehend in my distressed state, despite my language skills. "Mi dispiace," I managed to say. "I'm sorry, I'm a bit overwhelmed." The woman patted my hand sympathetically, while her husband asked in broken English, "You need help, police?" I considered it briefly, but wasn't sure what I would tell the police. My husband and his friends had abandoned me as a joke. It sounded ridiculous even to me. "No, thank you," I replied. "I just need to find transportation back to Porto Santo." They explained that the local bus had already made its last run to the coastal towns for the day, and there were no taxis regularly stationed in such a small village. The next bus wouldn't come until tomorrow morning. The reality of my situation sank in. I would have to stay overnight in Vicamare. The couple introduced as Giorgio and Maria suggested a small family-run hotel near the church. They even walked me there, speaking soothingly in a mix of Italian and English. The hotel was modest but clean. The owner, a middle-aged woman named Gabriella, looked concerned when Giorgio explained my situation. She showed me to a simple room with a narrow bed and a small window overlooking the village rooftops. Alone in the room, I checked my phone again. One text from Derek. "You're overreacting as usual. Find your way back to Florence if you're so independent." Florence. We weren't even staying in Florence anymore. Was this his way of saying he was done with our trip together? I sank onto the bed, tears flowing freely now. How had my anniversary trip turned into this nightmare? More importantly, how had my marriage deteriorated to the point where my husband thought it was acceptable to abandon me in a foreign country? As evening approached, hunger forced me out of the room. In the hotel's small dining area, Gabriella served a simple but delicious meal of pasta and local wine. I picked at my food, checking my phone obsessively, still expecting Derek to come to his senses and return for me. A young woman approached my table, introducing herself as Sofia, Gabriella's daughter. She spoke excellent English and asked if I was the American woman who had been left behind by her group. "My husband," I clarified, the words tasting bitter, "and his friends." Sofia's expression darkened. "That's terrible. Are you okay?" The simple question of genuine concern broke something in me, and I found myself telling Sofia the whole story of the trip, the constant exclusion, and finally being abandoned as a joke. "They will come back for you, surely?" she asked. "I don't know anymore," I admitted. "I thought I knew my husband, but now—" Sofia sat with me for hours, refilling my wine glass and offering a sympathetic ear. By the time I returned to my room, it was past midnight, and there were still no messages from Derek, except another text saying, "Stop being childish. Get a taxi back if you're so upset." That night I cried until I had no tears left. But somewhere in the darkness between sobs, I felt something unexpected, a tiny spark of anger that gradually grew stronger than my hurt. They had left me here laughing as they drove away. My husband of 7 years had chosen to humiliate me rather than stand up to his friends. When morning came, I felt different. The desperation had been replaced by a strange calm. I checked my phone to find several missed calls from Derek, followed by increasingly annoyed messages. "Where are you? It's not funny anymore. The joke's over, Alana. Just come back to the hotel. We're supposed to leave for Florence today. Stop being difficult." I sat by the window watching the village come to life below and made a decision that surprised me. I would not rush back to Porto Santo today. For the first time in years, I would make a choice solely for myself. Sofia found me at breakfast and was surprised by my decision. "You want to stay in Vicamare for how long?" "Just a few more days," I replied. I need time to think clearly about what happened and what I want to do next. Sophia smiled. Then you must let me show you around properly. Vicamare has many beautiful places tourists never see. Over the next 3 days, Sophia became my guide and friend. She showed me hidden viewpoints overlooking the sea, introduced me to local specialties in tiny restaurants, and taught me Italian phrases I hadn't learned in my formal studies. In the evenings, we joined other young locals in the plaza, drinking wine and talking under the stars. Derek's messages continued evolving from annoyed to angry to threatening. "I'm going to cancel your credit cards if you don't stop this nonsense." That message sent me into a brief panic, but I had enough cash to last a few more days, and Sophia assured me I could stay at her family's hotel at a reduced rate. On my 3rd day in Vicamare, Sophia introduced me to Marcus, an American photographer who had been living in Italy for 5 years. He was working on a book about coastal Italian villages and had been in Vicamare for several weeks. "So you were abandoned by your husband?" he asked when Sophia explained my situation. There was no judgment in his voice, only genuine concern. "It sounds crazy when you say it out loud," I admitted. "Not crazy," Marcus replied. "Cruel. There's a difference." His simple validation of my feelings was surprisingly powerful. We spent the afternoon talking about his photography, my translation work, and our shared love of Italian culture. Unlike the conversations with Derek's friends, there were no power plays or subtle put-downs, just genuine exchange. That evening I received a call from Derek's mother, Linda. Apparently Derek had told his parents I had run off during our trip after an argument. "Alana, dear, whatever happened, you can't just disappear like this," Linda said. "Derek is worried sick." I laughed bitterly. "Did Derek tell you that he and his friends literally drove away and left me in a strange village as a joke, that they laughed and said, 'Let's see how she gets back'?" Linda's shocked silence told me everything I needed to know. He said you had a fight and you chose to stay behind in one of the towns." "That's not what happened," I said firmly, "and the fact that he's lying about it tells me everything I need to know." After hanging up, I sat on the bed in my small hotel room and realized I had a decision to make. I could return to Derek and try to salvage our marriage, or I could take this unexpected detour as an opportunity to reassess my life. That night I had a panic attack when another text arrived from Derek. "I've canceled your cards. Time to grow up and come back." I sat on the floor struggling to breathe, feeling trapped and powerless. Sophia found me like that and stayed with me until I calmed down. Later, Marcus joined us for dinner and mentioned that friends of his ran a small hotel in Santorini, Greece. "They're always looking for people who speak multiple languages to help with their international guests," he said casually. "Just something to consider if you wanted a change of scenery." The next morning, I walked to the bus station with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Instead of buying a ticket to Porto Santo to meet Derek, I purchased one to the nearest train station, planning to make my way to a port where I could catch a ferry to Greece. As the bus pulled away from Vicamare, I sent Derek a final message. "I'm taking some time for myself. I'll contact you when I'm ready to talk. Please don't try to find me until then." Then I turned off my phone, watching the Italian countryside roll past the window, feeling equal parts terrified and exhilarated by my decision. The journey to Greece was a blur of trains, a bus ride to the port, and finally a ferry crossing the Mediterranean. I had moments of doubt and fear, wondering if I was making an impulsive mistake that I would regret. But with each mile that separated me from Derek and the humiliation I had experienced, I felt more certain I was moving in the right direction. When the ferry approached Santorini, the sight nearly took my breath away. The iconic whitewashed buildings perched on the steep caldera cliffs, contrasting dramatically with the deep blue of the Aegean Sea. As I disembarked with my small bag of hastily purchased essentials, tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming beauty and the sudden realization of my freedom. Marcus had called ahead to his friends Elena and Nikos, who owned a small boutique hotel called Azure Dreams on the edge of Oia. They were waiting for me at the port, holding a sign with my name. Elena embraced me warmly, as though we were old friends rather than strangers. "Marcus told us what happened," she said, as Nikos took my bag. "You are brave to make this journey alone." "I don't feel brave," I admitted. "Most of the time I feel terrified." That's what courage is, Nikos replied with a kind smile. Being afraid, but moving forward anyway. The drive to their hotel wound along cliff roads with spectacular views at every turn. Azure Dreams was as beautiful as its name suggested, a small collection of cave-style suites built into the caldera, each with a private terrace overlooking the sea. We have a small staff apartment that's vacant, Elena explained as she showed me around. It's yours for as long as you need it, in exchange for helping with our English-speaking guests. Marcus says your Italian is excellent too. The apartment was tiny, but perfect. A simple bedroom-bathroom and a small living area with a kitchenette. The jewel was the balcony, barely big enough for a chair and small table, but with a view that luxury hotels would charge thousands for. That evening I sat on the balcony watching the famous Santorini sunset paint the sky in shades of orange, pink, and purple. I allowed myself to fully feel everything I'd been suppressing: the hurt of Derek's betrayal, the fear of an uncertain future, but also the strange, growing excitement of possibility. My phone, which I'd finally turned back on, had dozens of missed calls and messages from Derek. The latest ones had shifted from anger to concern. "Alana, where are you? This isn't funny anymore. Your parents are worried too. Just let someone know you're safe. Please at least tell me what country you're in." I sent a brief message to my parents explaining that I was safe, but needed time away from Derek after what had happened in Italy. I promised to call them soon. To Derek, I sent only, "I'm safe. I need space. Please respect that." The next morning, Elena showed me around the hotel and explained my duties. I would help at the reception desk, assist English-speaking guests with recommendations and reservations, and occasionally translate documents for their business. The work was straightforward, and I found myself looking forward to having a purpose each day. My first week in Santorini passed in a blur of new experiences. During my hours off, I explored the winding pathways of Oia, discovering tiny shops and cafes tucked away from the main tourist areas. Elena and Nikos introduced me to other expatriates and locals, gradually building a small community around me. After nearly 3 weeks in Greece, I started a travel journal initially as a way to process my thoughts. The journal evolved into a blog where I documented my experiences in Santorini, the local culture, and hidden gems I discovered. Writing became therapeutic, helping me rebuild my sense of self outside of my marriage. 1 month after being abandoned in Vicomare, I finally made my first public social media post since leaving Italy. It was a photograph of the Santorini sunset from my balcony, with no location tag or explanation. Within minutes, Derek had commented, "Where are you? Please call me." I didn't respond, but I did call my parents that evening. They were relieved to hear my voice, and surprisingly supportive once I explained everything that had happened. "I always thought Derek became different after that promotion," my mother admitted, "but I never imagined he would do something like this." "Have you thought about what you want to do next?" my father asked gently. "About your marriage?" "I'm starting to," I replied honestly, "but I'm not ready to make any permanent decisions yet." Working at Azure Dreams helped me regain my confidence. Guests appreciated my language skills and recommendations. One afternoon, I helped an elderly Italian couple resolve a complicated booking issue, switching effortlessly between English and Italian. Elena watched with admiration. "You have a gift with languages," she said afterward. "Have you thought about returning to translation work?" That conversation sparked something in me. I reached out to former colleagues and discovered there was demand for remote translation services. Within weeks, I had secured my first freelance project, translating a travel guidebook, a perfect fit for my current situation. My small world expanded when Elena invited me to join her and some friends for a weekend trip to Naxos, another Greek island. The trip was refreshing, a chance to explore somewhere new without the weight of my past. One evening, sitting at a beachfront taverna, I realized I had gone several hours without thinking about Derek or our marriage. The realization was both liberating and sobering. Back in Santorini, I made a decision. It was time to formally end my marriage. The relationship had been breaking long before the incident in Italy. The abandonment was simply the final confirmation that Derek no longer valued me as a partner. I composed a lengthy email to Derek explaining my decision to file for divorce. I was calm and clear, not accusatory, but honest about how his behavior and choices had eroded our relationship over years, culminating in the cruel joke in Vicamare. His response came within hours, an erratic mixture of anger, pleading, and manipulation. He threatened legal action for abandonment, then in the next paragraph begged me to return and work on our marriage. He claimed Jack had pressured him into leaving me in the village, that he'd wanted to go back immediately, but was convinced I would find my way to the hotel on my own. I didn't reply. Instead, I contacted a lawyer recommended by an American expatriate I'd met through Elena. We began the process of filing for divorce remotely. Over the following weeks, Derek's messages continued evolving from threats to desperate pleas. I maintained my boundaries, responding only with practical information related to the divorce proceedings. I learned from mutual friends that he had told everyone I had had some kind of breakdown and run away from him in Italy, a narrative that painted him as the concerned husband and me as unstable. Despite the emotional turmoil of ending my marriage, I found myself thriving in other areas. My freelance translation business was growing steadily. I had formed genuine friendships with Elena Nikos and several other locals and expatriates. My blog had attracted a small but engaged following of travel enthusiasts. For the first time in years, I felt like I was living authentically, making choices based on my own desires rather than molding myself to fit someone else's expectations. The painful experience of being abandoned had forced me to confront how much of myself I had already abandoned in trying to save my marriage. One evening, about 8 weeks after arriving in Santorini, I received an unexpected message from Melissa, Jack's wife. "I left Jack," she wrote. "What happened to you in Italy made me see things clearly. Thank you for having the courage I lacked." Her message was a powerful reminder that our actions have ripple effects we can't always anticipate. By choosing myself, I had inadvertently given someone else permission to do the same. With each passing day in Greece, I grew more comfortable with my new life. The girl who had been left stranded in an Italian village was becoming a distant memory, replaced by a woman who had discovered her own resilience and worth. Exactly 1 month after I'd arrived in Santorini, I was at the reception desk of Azure Dreams, checking in a couple from Canada, when Elena appeared with an unusual expression on her face. "Alana," she said quietly, once the guests had gone to their room, "there's someone asking for you, an American man. He says he's your husband." My heart stuttered in my chest. "Derek is here in Santorini." Elena nodded grimly. "He's waiting in the courtyard. Do you want me to tell him to leave?" I took a deep breath, steadying myself against the desk. Part of me wanted to hide to avoid the confrontation, but another part, the stronger part that had been growing in me over the past month, knew this moment was inevitable. "No, I'll talk to him." As I walked through the hotel's bright courtyard, I spotted him immediately pacing near the fountain. Derek looked different, somehow smaller than I remembered, his confident posture replaced by nervous energy. When he saw me, his face lit up with hope. "Alana," he said, stepping toward me. "Thank God. Do you know how long I've been looking for you?" "How did you find me?" I asked, maintaining my distance. He ran a hand through his hair. "It wasn't easy. I tracked your credit card purchases to the ferry terminal. Then I hired someone to check hotels in Santorini until they found you. I've been searching for weeks." The fact that he had gone to such lengths might once have seemed romantic. Now it felt invasive, another example of him ignoring my clearly stated boundaries. "I asked for space, Derek. I was very clear about that." "Space. You disappeared without a trace. Do you have any idea what that's been like for me? For your family?" "My family knows exactly where I am," I replied calmly. "I've been in regular contact with them." His expression shifted from concern to anger, then back to pleading. "Can we go somewhere to talk privately?" I suggested a cafe in the village center, a public place where I felt safe, but where we could still have a conversation. As we walked in silence through Oya's narrow pathways, tourists brushed past us, oblivious to the drama unfolding. The cafe was perched on the edge of the caldera, offering spectacular views. We sat at a corner table away from other patrons. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. "You look different," Derek finally said. "You seem, changed." "I am changed," I acknowledged. Being abandoned in a foreign country tends to have that effect. Derek winced. About that. It wasn't my idea, you know. Jack suggested it, and things just happened so fast. I was going to go back for you right away, but then Jack said you needed to learn a lesson about being so dramatic. Stop, I interrupted, raising my hand. Do you hear yourself? You're a grown man, Derek. You made the choice to drive away and leave your wife alone in a strange village. No one forced you. He looked down at his coffee. I know it was wrong. I've regretted it every day since it happened. That's why I'm here to apologize and bring you home. We can work through this, go to counseling, whatever you need. This isn't just about what happened in Vicamare, I said quietly. That was just the final straw. Our marriage has been broken for a long time. You know that as well as I do. That's not true, he protested. We had a good life together. Did we? When was the last time you asked me about my dreams, my work? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't interrupted by calls from Jack or plans with your work friends? Derek's expression hardened. Is that what this is about? You're jealous of my friends? I shook my head, feeling a profound sadness, but also a surprising clarity. I'm not jealous, Derek. I'm just finally seeing things clearly. The way you and your friends treated me on that trip wasn't an anomaly. It was a reflection of how our relationship had evolved. I became an afterthought in your life, someone to be tolerated rather than cherished. That's not fair, he argued, but there was a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. I gave you everything: a beautiful home, financial security, vacations. Things, I said simply. You gave me things, but you took away something more important, my sense of self-worth, my voice in our relationship. Do you know what it feels like to be laughed at by your husband and his friends? To be left standing alone in a strange place because they thought it would be funny? Derek was silent, avoiding my gaze. How are your friends doing, by the way? I asked. Jack and the others. Derek shifted uncomfortably. Actually, things are kind of falling apart. Melissa left Jack 2 weeks ago, and Paul and Stephanie are separated. The news didn't surprise me. Turns out treating your spouse like an accessory rather than a partner isn't a sustainable relationship model. I never saw you as an accessory, Derek protested weakly. Maybe not at first, I conceded, but somewhere along the way that changed, and I let it happen. I dimmed my own light to avoid making you feel insecure. I gave up career opportunities to fit into your life. That's on me, and I'm working to fix it now. By running away to Greece, by filing for divorce without even talking to me first. Derek's voice rose with anger and frustration. That's not fixing anything, Alana. That's avoiding the problem. No, Derek. For the first time in years, I'm facing the problem head on. Our marriage is over. It was over before you left me in that village. What happened in Italy just forced me to finally see it. Derek stared at me, seemingly shocked by my calmness and resolve. I realized he had expected to find the same insecure woman he had left behind, broken and eager to be rescued. Instead, he found someone who had discovered her own strength. So that's it, he asked bitterly. 7 years of marriage and you're throwing it away over one mistake. It wasn't one mistake, I said gently, and I'm not throwing anything away. I'm choosing a different path forward for both of us. I'll fight this, he threatened, his voice hardening. I'll contest the divorce. I'll freeze our accounts. You can't just walk away. I had anticipated this reaction. You can make this difficult, or you can accept that we've grown in different directions. I've already spoken to a lawyer. I'm not asking for anything beyond what's legally mine. This doesn't have to be ugly, Derek. He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw the exact instant when he realized I was truly beyond his influence. His shoulders sagged slightly, the fight draining from him. I do love you, you know, he said quietly. In my way. I know, I replied, feeling a twinge of sadness for what we had once been to each other. But love shouldn't diminish you. It should help you grow. We parted soon after Derek promising to have his lawyer contact mine. As I watched him walk away toward his hotel, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief rather than regret. I had faced my fear and stood my ground. When I returned to Azure Dreams, Elena Nikos and several of my new friends were waiting anxiously. They had prepared for the worst, a crying, devastated Alana being pressured to return to America with her husband. Instead, I suggested we all go out for dinner to celebrate. Celebrate what? Elena asked, confused. Closure, I replied, and new beginnings. That night, surrounded by people who had known me for just a month, but who had shown me more genuine care than Derek's friends had in years, I felt truly free. 6 months later, my divorce was finalized with minimal drama. Derek eventually accepted the inevitable, perhaps influenced by the dissolution of his friends' marriages and the subsequent fracturing of their once tight social circle. I had settled into a rhythm of life between Greece and Italy, spending part of the year in Santorini, working at Azure Dreams, and part in a small apartment I had rented in Florence, where I focused on my growing translation business. My blog had expanded to include guides for solo female travelers, emphasizing safety empowerment and the joy of self-discovery. In a surprising turn of events, I received an offer to translate a best-selling Italian novel into English, a project that combined my language skills with my love of storytelling. The advance was enough to provide financial security for the year ahead. My relationship with my family had deepened through honest conversations about why I had stayed in an increasingly unhealthy marriage for so long. I didn't want to admit I had made a mistake. I confessed to my mother during one of our weekly video calls, and I kept hoping things would go back to how they were at the beginning. "That's the thing about beginnings," she replied wisely. "They're not meant to last. Either you grow together or you grow apart." One unexpected email arrived on a spring morning nearly a year after the incident in Italy. It was from Melissa Jack's ex-wife. "I wanted to thank you," she wrote. "Your courage in walking away inspired me to examine my own marriage. Jack's behavior in Italy wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern I had been ignoring. Since leaving, I've rediscovered parts of myself I thought were lost. I hope you're finding the same peace I am." Standing on my balcony in Santorini one evening, watching another spectacular sunset paint the sky, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. Being abandoned in that small Italian village had been painful and frightening, but it had also been the catalyst for the most profound growth of my life. I had learned that relationships should add to your sense of self, not diminish it. That true friends elevate you rather than mock you. That there is a difference between compromise and sacrifice. And perhaps most importantly, that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead us to where we're meant to be. The Alana who had stood alone in that village plaza fighting back tears as her husband drove away could never have imagined the strength, purpose, and joy she would find in the aftermath. Being left behind had ultimately set me free. Life is filled with unexpected detours. Sometimes the path you never planned to take is exactly the one you needed to find. Have you ever experienced a painful moment that ultimately led to positive change in your life? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that sometimes being left behind is the beginning of finding yourself. Thank you for traveling this road with me.